Everybody, this is Dream. This is going to be the DraftKings main slate on Sunday for the National Football League Week 3. Before I get started in this video, if you don't mind, please hit that subscribe button and the like button on this video. That would be really awesome. Really appreciate it. Make sure to check the description for Discord and for Patreon. And yeah, comment below if you have any comments or questions or any thoughts about any of the players I've mentioned. So with that said, let's get into these top picks. So we have lots of good quarterbacks, a lot of good games this week. I think we're going to have some really awesome games. Hopefully not too much weather issues, so hopefully the guys that are going to be in the best situations are going to have opportunity to have these big games. We obviously have some really interesting matchups. So with that said, let's get into it. So for quarterbacks, obviously Josh Allen's in a great spot here against Miami. He's basically matchup proof. His floor is around 20 fantasy points, and he's last season he had 29 and 18 against Miami, and so I think he's in a great spot in this particular matchup. Lamar Jackson, if he does play, which I think he probably will, is playing the New England Patriots, who are a little bit tougher defense, but he still has some upside in this game due to him being a running quarterback, and you know, he's just overall a pretty solid option. Patrick Mahomes is another guy I really like against Indianapolis rather. He has a lot of upside in this matchup, and this is one of the highest Vegas scoring teams on the slate in Kansas City, so I think he's in a great spot. Jalen Hurts has got similar upside to Lamar Jackson because of his running ability, plus he gets a better matchup than Lamar does with playing against Washington, and I really think he's in a great situation here. He's been playing really well. I've actually used him both for the first 2 weeks, and he's paid off nicely for me. His price has come up a little bit, but it's still good enough on DraftKings to make him a top option. Kyler Murray's another guy that's playing extremely well. Really had fun watching him last week, and I look for him to have another good game against the Rams. Now, last season, he had 22, and 6 fantasy points against them, so just keep that in mind. He's got some upside in this matchup. And then Kirk Cousins against Detroit. Now, his first 2 weeks have been tough, but he gets to go up against Detroit, who's one of the worst passing defenses in the league, and he's got a lot of weapons he can utilize, and I think he's going to have a big week. And it's probably due, which is really why his prices come down here on DraftKings. He's $6,700, so I really like him. At running back, we have some good options. First of all, we have Austin Eckler for the Chargers. Now he's obviously pretty expensive, but he has a lot of upside in this matchup, and he also gets a lot of catch opportunities, which I think he'll get quite a few in this game, simply because Jacksonville has some pretty good defensive players. Then we look at Joe Mixon for Cincinnati. He seems a little bit underpriced for what his potential production is here against the Jets, who are completely terrible. And he had 25 points against them last season, and it looks like he's going to have another big day against them this year, and hopefully he'll get his touchdown this week. Then we look at DeAndre Swift. I really like him, assuming he plays. His price is also pretty reasonable here on DraftKings at $7,200. And he has a lot of upside in this matchup, and he looks good to getting a touchdown at least in this game as well. Then we have Leonard Fournette, and he's got maybe the most bizarre situation. He hadn't had the best first 2 weeks. He did okay the first week, but the second week was a little off. He actually told the fans on Twitter that he was going to score some points this week for the fantasy players. And so he's also going up against Green Bay, who's not that good against the run. And so I look for him to have a pretty solid game against them. And his price point's simply amazing at $6,500 on DraftKings. Then we look at David Montgomery. Where'd he go? At $5,900. And I think he's in a great spot here. He's going to get 15 to 17 rushes for 100 yards against a really bad defense, at least so far this season. And I really think he's in a good spot to potentially have a good, solid game here. The Bears do have a decent defense, but I don't know that he's going to have any issue with them. Sorry, why am I saying the Bears? I'm talking about Houston. Houston has a pretty bad defense. I don't know why I said Bears, so scratch that part. Anyhow, then we have Michael Carter. Where is he? For the Jets. Now, he's kind of a really secondary option here, but he does have some upside in this game where he can get some catches as well in the backfield, and that's really going to help him get up to 10 or 15 fantasy points. And it is near minimum price. He's definitely a value option you can use if you just desperately need to save money here. Another guy to save money with is Antonio Gibson. Let's see if I can find him. For Washington against Philly, he's in a pretty good spot here. He's very boomer bust. He does need a touchdown to really probably in this matchup to make himself a good enough play, but he definitely has the opportunity here. And the same goes for Aaron Jones. He's in the exact same situation where he doesn't need to score a touchdown really to pay off, but he has the opportunity, and he have a good chance in this particular game. Then we'll look at Miles Sanders, and again, another guy that's in a very similar situation where he's going to have to score a touchdown potentially to get a good score here. But overall, I think these guys all have really good upside, assuming they can get a touchdown in these games. And then Damian Harris is the last guy I'm going to mention for New England. He's probably the weakest link of these guys, but he does have some potential in this particular game. I don't like him as much as some of the other options, but he did have a pretty decent week last week, so I think he has some upside here. I'm going to skip wide receiver for a moment and go to tight ends because I want to go because there's going to be mostly wide receivers, and I think from roster construction, your flex point is probably going to want to be a wide receiver this week more than a running back. Sometimes that's not true. Sometimes it is. To me, this week, it seems like that's going to be more necessary. At tight end, we have some good options here. Travis Kelce isn't my favorite option, but he should get 7 to 8 targets this week, and he has the potential for pretty big games. His price doesn't really excite me though. Mark Andrews, however, if pending that Jackson plays, he's going to be one of my favorite options at tight end, and his price is pretty good on DraftKings for his situation. And then when we look at Darren Waller for Las Vegas, now obviously Las Vegas had a couple rough weeks, but I think that he continues to have pretty solid games, and he's going to be able to get you to 10 to 20 fantasy points in this particular matchup as well against Tennessee. Dallas Goedert is another guy I think is in a pretty decent spot. I think he's a little bit capped on his total points, but he's also really inexpensive at 4,700. He should get 5 or 6 targets in this and get some decent yards. And then finally, Tyler Higbee for the Rams. He's probably the weakest link that I've got here, but he still has a potential to get about 10 or 15 fantasy points if he can, get enough yards on his 5 or 6 catches that he'll get. And then at the defensive position, I think that there's 3 teams to really look at. One being the Bengals against the Jets because, well, the Jets. The Bears against Houston because, well, Houston's not very good. And then also the Saints, which might be my favorite option against Carolina just because they seem to have they have some more potential for, like, sacks and stuff than some of the other teams. With that said, I think it's a really solid slate, so let's go ahead and get into the wide receivers since I still need to do those. So I've got some high-end options here. I'm just going to roll through them. I'm not going to click on each one of them here. But Cooper Kupp is my top guy. He's been really great the first 2 weeks, and I think he'll be great this game as well. He's had 3 good games against Arizona last season, though he does need to score more points than some of the games he had last season. Justin Jefferson is probably my top pick at wide receiver. He has a lot of upside in this game, and in 2 games against Detroit last year, he scored 38 and 22 fantasy points. I think he's on pace to do that again. Devontae Adams, he's got some upside in this matchup against Tennessee if Carr can get going. He is basically matchup proof, but he's still got to get the ball in his hands. Jamar Chase is in a great spot against the Jets. Stephon Diggs is a guy I really like for Buffalo. He's Buffalo's top option, and this is going to be a fun game where I think this game's going to be high scoring. So he's also a little bit less expensive at $7,700, so I really like what he's got going. Tyreek Hill showcased that he's going to be able to have big games in Miami, and so look for him to continue to try to do that week in and week out. And this game should be high scoring, like I said, Buffalo-Miami. And then we have Amon-Ra St. Brown for Detroit against Minnesota. Since the Minnesota game last season, he's had over 10 targets every week since, and he's been scoring lots of fantasy points. I think you'd be foolish not to use him. Plus, his price point's only $7,200. I mean, that's a pretty good price on this particular slate. Braden Cooks, where'd he go? So Braden Cooks for Houston's in a good spot here, and we're starting to get into the cheaper options. He's pretty safe, but he doesn't have a ton of upside here. You're looking 7 to 10 points. on a lot of these guys I'm going to mention here below. We've got T. Higgins. He actually has a little bit more upside because he's got touchdown potential in this game, and I really like to see. You got to really get in in these bigger sections. Then for Marquise Brown, I really like what he's doing so far this season, but he's going to get 8 or 10 targets in this game probably, and against the Rams, so he should have some opportunity in this game. Hopefully he can get 50 plus yards and a touchdown. And then a couple more, Garrett Wilson for the Jets, in a tough matchup, but has opportunity. Samuel for Washington, again, it's a tough matchup for him, but he's in an opportunity where he can get 10 or 15 points. Drake London for Atlanta's in a good spot against Seattle. And then Bateman, he's one of the guys I really like here against New England. Assuming that Jackson plays, he's going to be somebody who's going to have an opportunity to get a potential touchdown and score even up to 15 to 20 points. And then Adam Thielen, whose price has just dropped so far that we could definitely like him in this particular matchup. And then Hunter Renfrow, another guy that if he does play, he's somebody that could potentially get 10 or 15 points on the slate. Overall, I think the slate is pretty easy to find a lot of good value on, though you're going to have to make choices on which place you want to pay up. I definitely recommend paying for, at least $7,500 for a quarterback and probably at least $7,000 for at least your first or second running backs, I bet. And then you might throw a running back in flex, but I honestly like the wide receivers better, just because there's so much value there. With that said, thank you guys again for liking, commenting, subscribing. Feel free to leave a comment below, and have a nice day, everybody.